Hi there, Venom here with the replacement Big Blast Trigger installation guide. What you will need is pretty much just a Phillips head screwdriver, number 0 and number 1, and of course the trigger and your internals. So you start by unscrewing the top Phillips head screw on the Big Blast Trigger, the replacement one of course. You want to line it up with the flat underbelly of the stock tank. Slot the pin into the opening in the top part of the trigger and re-thread the screw back to the other side, and you should have the trigger on there pretty solid. Here's where you test fit the internals now in the shell. You'll notice if you haven't modified the shell at all, you'll need to make some modifications. There are ridges on the shell that need to be dremeled or cut away, however you choose to. So you want to mark those with a Sharpie. And you have to do this because otherwise the trigger will not move properly, if at all, because of the restrictions in the shell. Now, as you might have noticed, the Big Blast that I'm using in this video has already been modified a fair extent, and the parts of the shell that need to be modified have already been modified, but not completely. So I'll demonstrate what I can, but obviously if you're starting with a completely stock Big Blast, this process will go a little bit differently. So you want to wear some safety goggles for this part. And just begin dremeling where necessary. It doesn't need to be done super precisely. As long as you create enough room for the trigger to slide and move where it's necessary. Test fit it in the shell as you go along. And then when you think you're done, here you go. Line them up. Put on the top part of the shell. And remember to do the process to both sides of the shell, the sanding and modifications. Now, let's see how well it works. If you're satisfied with the performance, add the trigger spring back into the shell if you have it, and screw the blaster back together. You should be good to go. Hopefully, this trigger will last a lot longer than the stock one, or give your blaster a new life if the stock one has already been broken. Remember, this replacement trigger only works in the old style sliding trigger versions of the Big Blast. The newer lever triggers are not compatible because they're a completely different design. So make sure you have the right Big Blast before you purchase this trigger. Because I thought people might find it interesting, I took some footage of myself assembling the polycarbonate pieces using the screws and set screws and bolts needed to hold the trigger together. So here's some footage of that in high speed. Remember, the trigger is held together completely with mechanical fasteners. No adhesives whatsoever are used in the construction of one of these replacement triggers.